Good day everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I will be illustrating more about the SL120 and the AL120, their fans itself, the build of the controller, and the PCB that is hidden under the controller itself, and talk about the amperage and the power limit, and of course the effects on the lightings itself. Let's get into it. Now before I proceed, often I'm actually questioned as in like when I'm testing the AL and the SL unit, do I get any damages on my motherboard or does it blow my power supply and such? Now, just for your information, this is normally what I do. It's always a good practice to practice it safely, especially for electronic stuff. Now, I have purchased this. In fact, I've been using this all this while to actually play with the AL and the SL Uni Fans and other RGBs or aRGB controllers. So what this does is actually a unit itself, a splitter from your motherboard header. So this is actually where you connect to the USB 2 from the motherboard header and to plug it to here. Then from here, right, you can actually split the unit. As you can see here, I've actually plugged to my AL and SL controllers. Then the power drawn itself, right, instead of plugging this straight to the to the PSU of my main PC, I make use of an additional, or should I say external power supply. So drawing the source from the power supply here, right, if anything goes wrong, right, it will hurt this PSU instead of my main. And second good about this unit itself, right, when you connect this, right, if anything goes wrong, this will blow first instead of your motherboard header. And this is also a device whereby if you only got one USB 2 motherboard header and you want to extend more, you can actually purchase this. This is actually from NZXT. The internal USB hub you can actually purchase, and I would say that on the safe side, right, this is a good to go so that you will not blow up any unit. If it happens, right, it only happens on this unit itself, so your motherboard will be safe. I'd rather blow this up, which don't cost, you know, a few $100, is about, I think about $29 USD. So it will damage this if in the event there is overload current, instead of damaging your, you know, few $1,000 motherboard, your PC itself. All right, let's dig into this controller right now. Now, as you can see, I've actually dismantled the two controller, the AL and the SL. For those of you who actually new, I've actually done a video on the SL itself and how it functions. If you're curious, you can actually head down to that video. I'll leave the URL at my top right hand corner. Now, before I show you how this unit works, right, in fact the two units, they are of the same build, I should say, as in like the PCB circuitry is the same, the instruction and the execution is the same. The only difference is in fact the capacitor and the switches, and of course the PCB board. Now, just a general introduction on how this unit works. I'll start off with the connection point, the SATA cable, the USB connector, and the PWM connector. Now, there's a SATA cable that is actually connected to this connector here, whereby it draws power from the PSU and to provide the power to this unit. Next will be the USB connector, whereby you connect a USB cable directly to your USB 2 header from the motherboard, and you will take instructions from the L Connect application that goes through here, through this chip, and to deploy to these individual switches here, which in return providing instructions for each individual output. In fact, all these switches here, right, they control individually, as in like the first output, the second output, the third output, and the fourth output. And each switches, right, has two input points, whereby this switch is known as the quartz single pole single throw analog switch, and it controls of course the aRGB and the fan load. Next will be the PWM connector, whereby it takes in one instruction from the motherboard fan header to this unit itself. Now, having to say so, right, what's the difference between the AL and the SL itself? As mentioned, the PCB itself, this is slightly thinner on the SL. This is thicker. And next thing I did notice, in fact, is the capacitor itself. Now, rating on the SL original controller itself, right? This capacitor is actually at 100 microfarad, and it's actually running on 25 volt, or should I say hold the charge on 25 volt. Else for the AL, right, it has a bigger voltage, which is actually a 35 volt voltage. Having a higher voltage on the capacitor itself, what does it do? Well, it can actually hold larger charge, or should I say larger load, and the endurance on the temperature itself, right, is higher compared to the SL unit, because this is actually lower voltage. So do take note on this. Next thing is in fact the switch that I've noticed. The original switch over here, the chips over here, they are actually made from Texas Instruments. And on the AL itself, right, Lian Li have switched out the switches to a better switch. These are all German engineered switch, which is coming from a brand called Nexperia. Well done, Lian Li. You have actually didn't chip out on the chipset over here and the capacitor itself. Now, having to say so, right, both unit itself, the current load that I've actually traced, the amperage itself is about the same. This is slightly higher, not really that much higher. Reason being, right, the AL fan itself, the aRGB load, and the SL fans aRGB load, as you can see here, right, this SL is actually holding, is actually drawing at 0.65 ampere of aRGB load. Else for this, right, though it's actually not written over here, I've actually checked on the specs on Lian Li itself, it's actually rating at 0.66 ampere. Do take note that if you want to connect your AL fans, make sure you pair it with the AL controller and not the SL controller. Reason being, right, as I mentioned to you, the capacitor itself, the AL controller, the capacitor can actually hold larger charge and it can withstand higher temperature. So make sure that you connect the AL on this controller. If you were to connect this to this controller, right, not a problem, you can do that, but this will go warm. And furthermore, I would not advise you to do so, because this firmware over here is only meant for SL and not for AL. Even if you were to do an upgrade firmware, right, this firmware will only cater for SL. And why Lian Li have actually the firmware here, right, is actually to make use of the L Connect version 2, so that you only use one application to control two sets of different fans with two sets of controller. Now, this is actually what I've been using. I've actually set up both controllers to work on the L Connect version 2 software. So this is actually all you needed. And if you need to actually uninstall the previous version, right, I will guide you through later and to show you how. So as you can see here, the setup itself, right, just a brief introduction. Now, on the L Connect itself, it has two different units. One is for the SL, the other one for the AL. So if I were to change anything from here, right, okay, this pop-up message, you can just ignore it. Then you can just apply. See, it went static. And one thing good about this is that you can control individual fans, as in like individual colors, which is actually an enhanced mode from the previous L Connect one. So let me just show you. Let's say I select this and I would to push to the middle and I apply. See, it changes. So if I were to do the let's say the last one over here. Now I know the orientation is slightly different, so bear with me. If I were to do this, right, see, it's yellow, orange, and green. This is actually to control the SL120. Then of course you can actually switch all the different modes if you want to. See, you just go accordingly, and it will not affect your AL fans. So if you do switch to AL, again you can actually do all the static colors, etc. Up to you. See, you have three different ones, or you can actually do it like what in the controller itself, right? Let's say I want it orange. I can set all the three to be the same, which is orange. So this is actually how it goes. And if you do actually control the fan itself, as mentioned, right, these two units will follow only one PWM. And for SL itself, I've actually connected to my chassis 5 header, fan header, and for the AL, right, I've actually connected to my chassis 3 fan header. So I just show you on the SL unit itself. As you can see here, right, I can switch to PWM, then I apply. And when I do this, right, as mentioned to you, this is actually connected to my fan chassis 5. So if you notice the RPM over here, right, if I were to move this up based on the motherboard itself, right, you see, it ramps up, it goes up. So you can actually control it through this way. If I were to click here again, see, it went down. And if you do not want to use the PWM, right, you can actually just switch using this L Connect 2. If you were to actually hit quiet, it will be 800 RPM. So same apply when you do the rest. Same to the AL fan itself. If I were to switch to PWM, and I know that when you hit apply, right, it will follow my chassis tree on the motherboard itself. So let's say I were to actually do this. See, it will follow. Then if I were to ramp it up all the way, see, it goes up. So this is actually how you could do the controlling of the fans through RPM, through the PWM mode in the motherboard itself. Another very neat feature from this L Connect 2 is that it did have some enhancement. You can actually import export just like the version 1. Right now, instead of manually setting the L Connect 1 on the startup to boot up every time when you reboot the system, right, the L Connect 2 enable you to do that. Click on the settings itself and just set this to on and apply. So every time when you reboot the system, right, it will load the L Connect application and to load your profile. And of course, you can actually do as usual to export whatever configuration you have done on your fans. And next time, if you to actually refresh your PC, right, as in like reinstall the whole OS itself, remember to keep the export file, import it in, and you'll be done. Alright, this is all I have for you today, and on the next video, right, I will talk more about the firmware itself, how you get your SL120 to, the controller itself to be ready used in L Connect 2. If you like my content, do remember to subscribe and to click on the notification bell button. Till then, take care, goodbye, see ya.